You are a virgin kid with very bad luck with waifus. However, one day you discover a site where you can get rented girlfriends, and thanks to that your love life improves a lot. Hey people, do you know where to download that application? By the way, if you want to know the name of the anime during the video, it will appear below. Just leave a comment with the minute it appears and I will send you a heart. The anime begins with our protagonist Kazuya, who is very happy because at the age of 20 he has been able to get his first girlfriend. Her name is Mami. But suddenly she breaks up with him because, according to her, she fell in love with other. How sad. Now the protagonist is super sad because he didn't even last a month with his first girlfriend. Besides, she blocked him, so those classic thoughts come to his mind that, far from helping him, end up plunging him into misery after they leave him for another. But well, we are not here to succumb to depression. You come to this channel to have a good time. So let's see how our protagonist redeems himself from this breakup. There, he checks on his cell phone and finds out that there is a place where they rent girlfriends. Yes, you heard right, rented girlfriends. You enter, pay a certain amount of yen, and that's it. You have a girlfriend for a certain time. But careful, they are just girlfriends. So, as our protagonist feels lonely, he decides to place an order. So we see a waifu named Chizuru arrive, the protagonist pays her, and they go down the street pretending to be a couple, which includes a public grabbing of the hand and not much more pegs. I know what you were thinking. And although for us it may seem too much to pay a woman for a simple hand holding, the truth is that our protagonist was super excited about the waifu, so he began to investigate her. And of course, when doing so, he read the comments of the rest of the kids who rented a date with her, and he realized that she grabbed everyone's hand. Pissed off by this, he decides to pay her again, so they have another date, and there he takes the opportunity to make a complaint, which in truth is irrelevant because he knows that she pretends to be in love because she gets paid for it, but the protagonist is still resentful about the past breakup, so he somehow tries to let off steam. However, being scolded by her client's traumas didn't come in the contract, so the waifu lets him know by scolding him back. In that, the protagonist receives a call where they tell him that his grandmother fainted, so he runs to the hospital. Fortunately, it was nothing serious. The old woman is fine, and she is also very curious, because she asks who is the waifu that accompanies her grandson, and well, the protagonist tells her that she is his girlfriend. The protagonist's parents can't believe it, and the old woman, who is overjoyed because her virgin grandson finally got a girlfriend, proposes to leave the hospital to organize a party. However, she is still not in good condition, so they leave her hospitalized for a while longer. But that does not mean that her emotion has been taken away, because she decides to go and tell the rest of the old women in the hospital that her grandson found a girlfriend. The problem is that Chizuru's grandmother is also in that hospital, and she doesn't know that her granddaughter is a rented girlfriend, so if the prota's grandmother tells the waifu's grandmother, the waifu will get in trouble, so they have no choice but to hide under some sheets so that the gang of old women won't see them. This leaves them in a rather compromising position, and as our protagonist is quite needy, he can't help but get a stiffy. This naturally did not please Chizuru, who kicks him out of the way with a kick in the balls. And well, this causes the grandmothers to find them, so to avoid Chizuru getting into trouble, the protagonist wants to tell the whole truth, but the waifu doesn't want the truth to be known, so she continues pretending to be the girlfriend of the protagonist. Now her grandmother believes that the protagonist and Chizuru are really dating, but well, later, when the time for the paid date is about to end, Chizuru tells the protagonist that they will tell their grandmothers that they have broken up. The protagonist actually agrees because it's not like he plans to pay the waifu every day to pretend to be his girlfriend, but he tells her that his grandmother's dying wish is for him to get a girlfriend, which is why she was so excited. However, he also tells her that from that moment on he will strive to get a real girlfriend so that her grandmother will be happy without having to lie to her. That's how everyone goes home. The waifu notices that the prota left her a good review, and the next day, Kazuya decides to start from scratch in the mission to get a real girlfriend. And although seeing his ex with her new boyfriend doesn't help him, in the end he stumbles upon a waifu identical to Chizuru, or rather, you could say she's Chizuru in disguise. The protagonist has his doubts, but in the end he concludes that she is a waifu similar to Chizuru and continues on his way. However, this waifu confronts him later to ask him not to tell anyone that he knows her. And yes people, in the end the girl with the glasses is Chizuru, who changes her appearance to go to college because she doesn't want people there to know about her work as a rented girlfriend. In fact, she tries not to accept clients who live near the university to avoid this type of situation. But things went very wrong with the main character, as it turns out that even their bedrooms are next to each other. As this is uncomfortable for Chizuru, she asks the prota to try not to talk to her. So well, the prota goes to his room, and there he gets a call from his grandmother who says she will come to visit him to talk a bit with Chizuru. As his grandmother is very happy with Chizuru, the protagonist doesn't get the courage to tell her that they broke up, so he goes to ask Chizuru to help him by renting one more hour while his grandmother visits him. However, Chizuru says that by the contract she is not allowed to have dates in the client's bedroom, so well, she tells the protagonist to tell the truth to his grandmother and that's it. But the protagonist does not have the courage to tell his grandmother, but as the grandmother notices that the hours pass and Chizuru does not arrive, she begins to think that the protagonist was left for being an asshole. There she begins to scold him for having scared away a woman as good as Chizuru and tells him that he will never find a woman like her and blah blah blah. In a few words, the protagonist's grandmother seems to love Chizuru, who met a day ago, more than her own grandson. All this that the grandmother said was heard by the waifu, who finally decided to appear to the joy of the old woman, and accompanied them until she left. The lady is delighted with Chizuru, so she tells the protagonist to take Chizuru with him on his weekly visits on Wednesdays. After the grandmother leaves, the protagonist wants to pay Chizuru for having covered it. She does not accept the money since she did it for the lady, and precisely in order not to disappoint her, they agree that the protagonist will pay the waifu every Wednesday, so that she can go with his grandmother. But that's it. Chizuru clarifies that they will only speak on Wednesdays during the hour of visiting her grandmother and nothing else. She does not want the protagonist to speak to her at the university or at the residence. Sometime later, the protagonist goes to the university and there he bumps into his ex. She greets him and the main character walks petrified. The poor kid got very nervous and didn't know what to say to his ex. She greeted him and everything, but Kazuya walked around like a zombie. When leaving the university, he went to touch himself in his room, but there he is called by Chizuru since they must go visit the grandmother. After the visit, they return holding hands as indicated by the dating protocol. The problem is that they are seen by the protagonist's nerdy friends. At first, Kazuya is worried that they might recognize Chizuru, but when he realizes that they don't recognize her, he decides to show off by saying that Chizuru is his girlfriend. What Kazuya didn't count on was that the nerds were going to take them to another place to get to know her better, and that in that other place they were going to meet the ex of the protagonist, so the situation became quite tense. Mommy, who you can tell is jealous because the prota found someone else, starts to make fun of him for the way he behaved when they were dating. Their Chizuru stands up to defend the prota, but the fool of the prota, instead of being on Chizuru's side who was defending him, gives the reason to his ex, which naturally makes Chizuru leave the place upset. The prota doesn't pay much attention to her since Chizuru is a rented girlfriend, but this is something his ex doesn't know, so she comes over to thank him for giving her the reason before his girlfriend, and furthermore, invites him over to her place. There the protagonist asks her if her boyfriend would agree, but nah, the waifu doesn't have a boyfriend at all. She said she had a boyfriend just to make the protagonist jealous. This being the case, the protagonist wants to accept the invitation home, but right then and there, Mommy realizes that her brother will be there, so she cancels the invitation. But this is not an impediment for the protagonist, because since Mommy has already shown interest, he decides to be the one to invite her to his house. But his ex rejects the invitation because she doesn't want problems with Chizuru, because they had a problem a while ago and she prefers to avoid causing more problems in their relationship. That's when the protagonist, upon hearing Chizuru's name, remembers that he has to go and apologize. But Chizuru tells him that he doesn't have to apologize to her, as she is his rented girlfriend, so everything is okay. Rather, she asks him if he was able to get back with the ex. Kazuya tells him no, and as he is still in sentimental mode, he cries because of everything that happened with his ex. The next day, the protagonist goes on a walk to the beach with his university classmates, and during the trip, he finds out that his ex also went. And it is that Mommy wants to recover the protagonist, the typical thing. They see you single and they don't want you, but when you get a girlfriend, that's when they all want you. This is the current situation of the main character. Being at the beach, Mommy starts to hint to the main character to come back, and of course, the main character wants to tell her that Chizuru is a rented girlfriend, so in theory he is single and they can come back. But in that, he notices that Chizuru is also at the beach, but disguised as a university student, and she is known as Ichinos, and no one suspects that Ichinos is Chizuru. Finally, Chizuru leaves, and the protagonist decides not to tell Mommy the truth, because before he went to talk with Chizuru to let her know that he is considering leaving her to go back with his ex, but of course, Chizuru tells him not to be a jerk, because what they have is fictitious, so he doesn't have to notify her or anything. There, Mommy hears that the protagonist is locked up with a woman and wants to know who it was, so well, Chizuru has no choice but to go out. but she does it by showing herself as the protagonist's girlfriend. Well, it doesn't suit her either that they know that Chizuru is Ichino's. So well, she has to pretend to be the protagonist's girlfriend for the rest of the day. And of course, Mommy keeps looking for a way for Chizuru and the protagonist to break up so she can get him back. In that, she calls the protagonist behind some stones, pretends to stumble, and ends up kissing him. This kiss makes the protagonist remember the day he met Mommy, the beautiful moments of their month-long courtship, and well, then he returns to reality where Mommy apologizes for kissing him since he has a girlfriend. Back with the rest, the protagonist is thinking of breaking up with Chizuru and going with Mommy at once. However, he considers it indecent to do it there in front of everyone. In that, he receives a call from his grandmother who says she is excited to see Chizuru again, and since he wants to stop lying to his grandmother too, he takes advantage of the moment to go to the rest and announce that Chizuru and he are about to stop dating. But this did not like one of his nerdy friends, who smacked him and complained about the fact that he wants to break up Chizuru, since he knows that what the protagonist is looking for is to return with Mommy. Later, Chizuru congratulates the protagonist for finally making the right decision because now they can stop lying, and this act of courage earned him the respect of Chizuru, who says goodbye to him with affectionate eyes. Later on, she tries to go back to her friends, but in that, the nerd wants to talk to her to tell her about the protagonist, because he confesses that he has known him since they were children, and he can assure her that Kanzuya is not a bad person, so he asks to give him another chance. Basically, the protagonist's friend named Kaibe is speaking well of the protagonist so that Chizuru doesn't leave him. The world needs more guys like Kaibe. And the protagonist, who is listening to the conversation hidden in some branches, cries for the loyalty of his friend, who instead of taking advantage of the break to stay with Kanzuya, is doing everything possible so that the protagonist does not die a virgin. Their dog gives him away and Kaibe leaves so he can talk to Chizuru. At that, Chizuru tells the prota to spend the rest of the day together since Kaibe's speech moved her, and after that day, they will break up and tell Kaibe that they made the decision after thinking things over. That's how they go to a ferry with some tickets that Kaibe gave them. Their Chizuru begins to feel bad and the prota receives a call from Mommy to meet at the hotel pool. However, Chizuru falls off the ferry, which makes the prota not hesitate to drop his phone and go to rescue her like a true hero. That's how he manages to get her to the seashore. But now he's the one who's passed out, so Chizuru has to give him first aid. And since the protagonist doesn't react, the waifu has no choice but to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. That's when the protagonist reacts. He notes that the waifu was the one who revived him, and after a while the coast guards arrive to take them back to the beach. There they take Chizuru to the hospital since her lungs received a lot of water, and during the journey she begins to remember what the protagonist did to save her and blushes. And of course, the next day Mommy doesn't want to talk to the protagonist, since he left her waiting at the hotel pool while he was having fun in the sea with Chizuru. But well, their Kaibe tells him to stop begging his ex since he has Chizuru. The protagonist tries to make Kaibe understand that his relationship with Chizuru is impossible, but Kaibe tells him that after saving his life, nothing is impossible. This makes the protagonist start to consider Chizuru as a possibility, but when he sees her breasts he seems to regret it. Well, the protagonist has a good problem right now. Those types of problems of not knowing how to choose which waifu to stay with are the ones that I would like to have. The next day, he goes with his family on a trip to a spa to see if he can clear his thoughts there. But there his grandmother invited Chizuru's grandmother, and it is that these two ladies are in collusion so that their grandchildren get married, because they send the protagonist to the room without telling him that Chizuru would be there. When they see each other, they are both surprised, but Chizuru immediately understands that it is a plot of the grandmother's, so she is going to complain to them. But the old ladies don't pay any attention to her, and she sends them to the room again so they can do their little couple things. So well, the kids have no choice but to live together, and even the waifu tells the protagonist that he can stay so they can sleep together. At the proposal, the prota begins to imagine that maybe the waifu wants to have fun that night, but Chizuru makes it very clear that the reason why she invited him to stay is because she does not want him to sleep in the hallway, and at once warns the prota that if he wants to take advantage during the night, she herself will beat him because the waifu knows self-defense techniques. There during the night, the protagonist tells the waifu that he feels that when he is with her he is more mature, so he asks her to please agree to him continuing to rent her so that he can continue to improve as a person. Chizuru tells him that she agrees, since one of the purposes of the agency she works for as a girlfriend is to help clients improve their private lives, and that includes helping them overcome their insecurities. So Chizuru agrees to continue being rented by the protagonist, but warns him that she doesn't want it to be for a long time, since the plan is for the protagonist to get a real girlfriend, in order to stop lying to his grandmothers. Several days later, the protagonist tells his friends that he and Chizuru are still together, especially so that Kai doesn't gossip to his grandmother. And then, the waifu tells the protagonist that since she notices that his progress is slow, she herself will help him find a girlfriend so that he can present her to his grandmother and put the farce aside. In that, one of his nerd friends named Korabashi tells him that he has got a girlfriend and invites the protagonist for a double date. Kazuya can't believe that his nerd friend has got a girlfriend, and in that, he bumps into a short-haired waifu who realizes that the protagonist kind of wants to see her panties, so she insults him and leaves. The next day at the double date, we find out that Korabashi's girlfriend is precisely the waifu with whom the protagonist had collided. Her name is Ruka, and for the date she looks something different. This is how the four go climbing, and the protagonist asks his friend how he got such a pretty girlfriend, if she is uglier and poorer than him. To which Korabashi tells him that he conquered her by being manly. Yes, of course, not even your mother believes that. For their part, the waifus are alone and Ruka tells Chizuru that she knows that she is a rental girlfriend. Chizuru denies it, but Ruka does not believe the story, so later, she asks Chizuru to kiss the protagonist to prove that they are real boyfriends. Chizuru does it but with a cheat, so Ruka doesn't believe her. When the nerd arrives, the protagonist makes an excuse to get rid of Chizuru since he considers it dangerous that Ruka continues to test them in front of the nerd. After Chizuru leaves, the protagonist accompanies the couple until they wait for them to separate, because he wants to investigate Ruka. The problem is that Ruka realizes, and with this she says she is more sure that the protagonist and Chizuru are fake boyfriends. That being the situation, the prota ends up admitting that she is right. However, he asks Ruka to please keep the secret. Ruka says she has no intention of telling anyone, but the prota doesn't trust the waifu's word and wants her to promise him through a recording. Ruka feels uncomfortable because of the prota's attitude, so she runs away. So she stumbles on the stairs, but the prota bravely protects her so that she doesn't get beaten up, and even so, he begs her again not to say anything about his rental girlfriend. Therein Ruka decides to confess that she will not say anything, since she is also a rental girlfriend. After this, the protagonist goes with the gossip to Chizuru. When she finds out, she immediately investigates it in the agency's database, and realizes that she is actually a rental girlfriend. However, Chizuru says that they should still be cautious in case Ruka wants to rat them out, since she can't let her grandmother find out she's renting. Ruka appears out of nowhere to want to talk to him. Kazuya doesn't want to do it since he notices that his friend is on his way, so before they see them, he leaves with Ruka. To hide, the detail is that in the end their friend the nerd ends up finding them. But since Ruka, unlike the protagonist and Chizuru, is not covering up his business, she admits that she and Korabashi are nothing because he simply rented it for once and that's it. Ruka's confession in front of the protagonist, the nerd leaves the room sad as his rental girlfriend has ratted him out to his friend. The protagonist, who perfectly understands the situation, decides to go look for his friend to comfort him, but he can't, so later, he tells Chizuru from the door that Ruka ratted on his friend about renting her. And at that, Ruka arrives, who could not talk to the protagonist as she wanted because they were interrupted, and Ruka wanted to ask the protagonist to go out with her, but not as boyfriend and girlfriend for rent, but as her real boyfriend. Yes people, so you heard, Ruka is in love with the protagonist and wants to date him. Well, after finding out about the fairy and seeing how he treats his fake girlfriend, she ended up liking him. And the waifu is quite intense, as she even pretends to make the main character jealous with Chizuru, even though she knows that the relationship between her and the main character is because of the rental contract. To get her off his back, the protagonist asks her to let her talk alone with Chizuru for a while. There the protagonist confesses that despite the fact that Ruka seems pretty to him, he would never accept being her boyfriend since she is the ex of his nerdy friend. And even though that relationship was fictitious, he would not be able to do that to his friend. Chizuru applauds the protagonist's decision and says that it is the best thing to do, since relationships should only take place if both agree. However, the protagonist knows that if he rejects Ruka, she will tell his friend that Chizuru is a rental girlfriend, so before she gives him away, the protagonist is going to tell him himself and ask him to keep the secret. The problem is that when he is about to run away without Ruka seeing him, Ruka sees him and falls from the tree. And no matter how he tries to run away, Ruka eventually catches up with him since the main character was left limping from fall. There, once and for all, the protagonist tells Ruka that he can't have anything with her, since if he does, he would be trampling on his friend's feelings. This makes Ruka cry because of the rejection and asks the protagonist for an opportunity at least for a trial period. Seeing this, Chizuru tells the protagonist that in the end he should go out with her, accepting the condition that it will be a period test, and with it, they will make her keep the secret. In other words, the sermon on the feelings of the protagonist's friend suddenly lost value. Yes, of course, since he is a secondary character, they don't care what he feels. So well, finally the main character and Ruka start dating since the main character does everything Chizuru says. The problem is that Ruka came out very intense and doesn't leave the main character alone even when he's at home, because she's texting him all the time and gets angry if she's left unattended. Even when he goes to university, he meets Ruka, and Ruka doesn't study there since he's younger. There the protagonist begs her not to look for him at the university since he does not want his friend to find out that they are dating. Ruka accepts but asks the protagonist to go see a movie, and she begins to grab him as usual. This is seen by Chizuru, who is actually feeling jealous even though she appears otherwise. The truth is that Christmas is coming, Ruka will spend it with her parents, and the protagonist's wish is to spend it with Chizuru, so he thinks about renting her for that day. However, when reviewing the application, he realizes that someone already rented her for that day, so the protagonist is thinking that he will spend Christmas alone. Sometime later, while on the street, he realizes that Chizuru is seeing a boy, and since the boy is handsome, the protagonist begins to think that perhaps this boy is Chizuru's real boyfriend who sought her out so they can spend Christmas together. However, everything is conjecture, and since he has nothing better to do, he decides to spy on them to find out the truth. There he finds out that the boy's name is Umi, and from seeing them together so much without being able to discover if he is a real or rented boyfriend, the protagonist is losing his hair from the intrigue. Continuing with the espionage, the protagonist hears that Chizuru will cook dinner for the boy, which makes the protagonist think the worst, so he concludes that he no longer has any reason to spy, since it is obvious that the boy is the real boyfriend of the waifu. So well, he stops following them and goes to a bathroom to pass his bitterness. The detail is that Omi enters the bathroom, and the protagonist hears that he talks on the phone with someone else about the waifu, and he does it in a suspicious way, so the protagonist concludes that Omi is planning to do indecent things with Chizuru, so he decides to follow them again. There, noticing that Omi tries to kiss her, he can't wait and appears to interrupt them, but Chizuru clarifies to the protagonist that Omi wasn't going to kiss her but was going to fix her sarcillo. Taking advantage of the fact that the waifu was confessing things, the protagonist asks her if Umi is her boyfriend. She says no, and then Omi says that what she was listening to while spying on them was part of the script. And yes people, it turns out that Chizuru is an actress and the kid is a fellow actor who is helping her rehearse. Both are starting their career as actors, and the waifu uses the money from the dates to pay for the acting school that is very expensive. Having cleared up the misunderstanding, the protagonist is sad because he came off as a controlling psychopath, so he apologizes to the waifu for following her. However, the waifu is not upset and even gives him a new phone case as a Christmas present. This makes the kid cry since a waifu had never given him anything. The next day, the boy got a job because he went bankrupt from paying Chizuru so much. But well, the boy is still happy with the cover that the waifu gave him, because he considers that it makes him special for her. However, the protagonist finds out the reality when he checks on the dating site and notices that other rental girlfriends also gave Christmas gifts to their rented boyfriends, and this is something that Chizuru later confirms to him so that he does not get excited, since the same agency is the one that orders them to give gifts to their rental boyfriends. So, after clearing up the misunderstanding, they go home. There, Ruka suddenly appears to take the protagonist out to eat, and then, the damned woman blindfolds him and takes him to a hotel. The protagonist immediately understands that Ruka wants to do the delicious, so he panics. However, Ruka tells him that what she wants is to know what his true relationship with Chizuru is, because now that he has a real girlfriend he shouldn't continue dating her. There the prota tells her about the grandmother situation and everything, but Ruka doesn't like it at all, so she offers to let the prota introduce her to her grandmother as his new girlfriend so she can stop hiring Chizuru. The protagonist says he can't do something like that so suddenly, but Ruka notices that the protagonist is hesitant, so she offers to take his virginity. This makes the protagonist panic again, and he goes to the bathroom, and when he comes out, he notices that Ruka is gone. As it turns out, she's over her horniness. The next day, the protagonist and Chizuru went out with the granny, And in that, Ruka appears wanting to give the lady love to gain her trust. However, the protagonist introduces her as a friend, and well, the grandmother accepts her on the walk. But of course, Ruka was not going to stay with that one, so later, she tells the grandmother that she is actually the protagonist's girlfriend. This makes the grandmother angry and gives the protagonist her blows since she understands that the jerk is cheating on Chizuru. The protagonist saves himself from the beating by telling his grandmother that Ruka is a mythomaniac, that is, she tells many lies compulsively. And meanwhile, Ruka is confronting Chizuru to help her by telling the truth to grandma. But Chizuru doesn't want to, so Ruka interprets that the reason she doesn't want to do it is because deep down she likes the protagonist. And the truth is that yes people, but Chizuru denies it. Or if you don't think about why else she would continue to maintain the farce, if she already has the perfect excuse to leave the protagonist given that he got a girlfriend. Anyway, the farce continues and Ruka can't find a way to make her grandmother understand that she is the main character's real girlfriend. So she takes her to a secluded place to convince her. However, upon hearing that the lady is very fond of Chizuru, she decides to leave it at that. Later, the protagonist thanks her for not ratting him out, but Ruka says that she didn't do it because it wasn't the time. However, she warns him that she will work to win the old woman's affection, and when she does, he will tell her the truth. That is to say, that from here Ruka and Chizuru will begin to compete for the acceptance of the protagonist's grandmother. Whoever is most dear to her will be Kazuya's girlfriend. As you hear it, no matter what he thinks or feels. Here the important thing is the grandmother. Sometime later, the protagonist goes to work and finds out that Ruka also has to work there, all in order to have him closer. After a while, his friends from the university arrive at the store. However, the one who was Ruka's boyfriend did not go. Since that breakup he has been depressed without socializing or anything. Upon learning of this, the protagonist feels a little guilty and looks for a way to make Kurabashi feel better. That's when it occurs to him to ask Chizuru for a favor to have an appointment with him. So he would also find out that he also hired a rental girlfriend, which would make him feel less bad. For this reason, the protagonist summoned Kurabashi for an unknown meeting and Chizuru arrives there to tell him that she will have an appointment with him since she is a rental girlfriend. Kurabashi doubts at first, but after looking for her in the application, he confirms that in Chizuru effect is rented, so the protagonist was also doing the same as him. The problem is that Kurabashi finds it quite strange to go out with what he thought was his friend's girlfriend, so thinking that perhaps the protagonist is trying to play a prank on him, he says that he will abandon the date, but when Chizuru tells him that she will ride alone in the amusement park, Kurabashi changes her mind since she does not know that leaving her alone would be ungentlemanly. There, after spending the day with Chizuru, the nerd realizes why the protagonist hasn't stopped renting her, because Chizuru is quite good at being a fake girlfriend, since she makes her clients feel very good when they're with her. Having felt that feeling, Kurabashi decides to keep trusting in love until he finds a waifu similar to Chizuru. In that, they meet with the protagonist who, as usual, is spying. There Chizuru leaves them alone to talk for a while. Kurabashi takes the opportunity to mock because the main character did the same as him, and Kazuya, noticing that his friend is happy again, leaves so that Kurabashi can continue his appointment with Chizuru. Sometime later, the protagonist receives a letter from Chizuru so that they can see each other on the balcony. This makes the protagonist emotional since it is a private meeting that is different from conventional dating. There Chizuru asks him for a favor, because she wants the protagonist to go out with a partner of her who is new to being a rental girlfriend, since she is very shy and some clients have complained. Now Chizuru wants the protagonist to go out with her so that she gains confidence. There, when saying goodbye, she tells him that this waifu is called Sumi. And well, in a change of scene we will meet the aforementioned Sumi, who is in her first year of university, is new to work as a rented girlfriend, and since she is shy, sometimes she feels that she does not give her best to clients. That's why one day she asked the agency's best girlfriend for rent for advice, that is none other than the waifu Chizuru. There she told her that it is normal for her to feel nervous since she is just starting. What she needs is to have more experience and find a client who understands and accepts her as she is. So well, that's where Chizuru's proposal came from for the protagonist to help her with her shyness. For this reason we see them dating. At first Sumi is quite nervous, but then she relaxes a bit, and in that, the protagonist is seen by his ex who will surely be thinking that the protagonist is a dog. But well, Kazuya didn't realize that his ex saw him, so he continues calmly on his date with Sumi. After a while they both go bowling, the waifu falls and becomes shy again, the protagonist goes to get her a drink, and at that, he notices that some guys are pretending to take advantage of Sumi's shyness. Seeing this, the protagonist is going to take her away since the guys were getting quite intense. After that, Sumi gets a little confident and manages to take the protagonist by the hand, all while his ex spies on him. Sometime later they go to eat ice cream and the very embarrassed waifu offers him hers. The protagonist accepts and immediately begins to imagine dirty things, but hey, remember that she is only a rental girlfriend, and above all it is a favor that he is doing. So after he regains his sanity he spends some more time with Sumi. While they are skating he breaks his nose, so he has to go to the bathroom, and when he returns, he finds that his ex is sitting at the same table with Sumi. The main character doesn't know what to say to Mommy, because if he tells her that she's his girlfriend, she'll think he's cheating on Chizuru, and if he tells her that she's a rental girlfriend, she'll make fun of him. So he thinks about telling her that she's a friend from the childhood, but Sumi begins to play her role as a girlfriend, which makes the lie more complicated for the protagonist. The conclusion Mommy reaches is that the protagonist is cheating on Chizuru. However, she tells the protagonist that she will keep the secret, so he can rest assured that she is not going to give him away. Sometime later, the date between the protagonist and Sumi ends, and thanks to the attitude of the protagonist, Sumi was able to have more confidence, so she thanks Chizuru for making her go out with him. For her part, Mommy can't believe that now her ex has become a womanizer, so out of simple curiosity she decides to investigate Sumi, and in doing so, she realizes that she is a rental girlfriend. Meanwhile, Chizuru thanks the protagonist for going out with Sumi, and right there she informs him that apparently, they will give her an important role as an actress, so when she gets it, she will stop being a girlfriend for rent. This makes the protagonist feel sad, since he is in love with Chizuru and the only excuse he had to spend time with her was paying her as his rental girlfriend. The next day, Chizuru is hired by a client, but when she arrives for the appointment, she realizes that the client was Mommy. And well, as the main character knows that Chizuru will soon stop dating him, he decides to give Ruka a chance to try to make it work. So after a date, the main character is about to tell Ruka that the trial period is over and that he would like them to become real boyfriend and girlfriend. But at that moment, he notices Mommy and Chizuru behind him, who are hiding in a karaoke room. Their Mommy pays Chizuru the money for the date, which is a sign that Mommy already knows that Chizuru is a rental girlfriend, so to fulfill the formalities of the date, she asks her to sing something for her. Meanwhile, the protagonist is wanting to know what the hell Mommy and Chizuru are doing in a karaoke, but in that, Ruka arrives to take him away. Inside the room, Mommy asks Chizuru to stop dating the protagonist, because she says that everyone in the university believes that his thing is real, and also, she says that as long as Kanzuya dates her, he will never be able to find a real girlfriend. Not to mention the fact that Mommy is quite annoyed to see the protagonist and Chizuru together. Sometime later they finish talking, and the only thing the protagonist can conclude is that Mommy found out that Chizuru was a rental girlfriend, and was paying her to have a date. However, he doesn't understand why. So thinking of having an excuse to leave work and go find out, he decides to vomit on purpose. With this his boss lets him out, and of course the protagonist is going to follow the waifus. When he reaches them, he manages to hear that Mommy says goodbye, saying that she will not tell anyone at the university about her work, but in that Chizuru asks her what she feels about the protagonist, since she abandoned him before and now she seems very interested. Mommy admits that she does like him a little, but immediately returns the question to Chizuru about how she feels about the main character, suggesting that after renting herself so much for the main character, now perhaps she ended up falling in love. But Chizuru denies it, and instead of admitting it, she asks Mommy to return with the protagonist since he was very much in love with her. But Mommy doesn't follow Chizuru's orders, so she leaves. While all this was going on, the protagonist was listening to everything and is now screaming. Later, he catches up with Chizuru and confesses that he was spying on her and knows that she talked to Mommy. There Chizuru is shocked, but well, in the end she ends up apologizing since she couldn't get him to go back to Mommy. But the protagonist doesn't want to go back with Mommy. He wants to be with Chizuru for real, so he finally gets up the courage to tell her. He tells her that he doesn't want to be with anyone else but her. There Chizuru asks him to explain himself better, and the protagonist, instead of telling her that he wants her to be his real girlfriend, tells her that he wants her as a rental girlfriend. So well, in the end the protagonist screwed up. During the proposal, the waifu was starting to feel butterflies in her stomach, and this means that Chizuru was probably going to say yes on being the protagonist's true girlfriend. But since the coward regretted it at the last minute, it will be time to wait for a second part of this anime to find out if these two finally become boyfriends, if the protagonist stays with Ruka, or if, on the contrary, he forms a harem. But if you want that second part to arrive soon, leave me the word girlfriend in the comments, and with that I will start working.